When liberal TV host Elle Duncan attempted to ambush Caitlin Clark with a series of calculated questions on live television, she had no idea it would turn into one of the biggest mistakes of her career. The primetime broadcast on a major network had millions of viewers watching, and Elle was infamous for her aggressive gotcha moments, particularly with athletes who didn't fit her narrative. She thought she had the perfect trap set for Caitlin, one she'd carefully crafted with her team over weeks, designed to humiliate the rising star and challenge everything she stood for. As the cameras rolled, Caitlin sat calmly in her chair, unruffled while Elle flashed her signature media smile, confident but calculated. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The red light blinked on. Caitlin, you've built an incredible career. Broken records. Become a role model to millions. Would you say you're just lucky? Elle asked with practiced ease, her smile never faltering. On the surface, it seemed like a harmless question, but Caitlin recognized the familiar tactic. Soften the tone first, then twist the knife. Caitlin leaned forward slightly, her voice steady, her expression a mixture of confidence and amusement. It's interesting that you ask that, she began. People love to use the word lucky. It's a way to downplay hard work, discipline, and sacrifice. But let me tell you something about luck. Luck doesn't make thousands of free throws at 5 a.m. Luck doesn't spend years training while others sleep. And luck certainly doesn't break records on the court. Lee's smile tightened, not expecting this kind of response, but she pressed on. So you're saying everything you've achieved is purely through hard work? Caitlin's voice grew stronger. Success comes to those who earn it. Yes, I've been blessed with talent, but I've also worked harder than most people can imagine. I've played through injuries, overcome setbacks, and faced challenges that would have made others quit. But here's what really matters. I've never done it alone. Elle raised an eyebrow. Not alone? She asked, her voice dripping with feigned curiosity. Let's talk about the people behind Caitlin Clark. Of course, Caitlin responded smoothly. When you mention the people behind me, you're probably thinking of my coaches, my teammates, my family, but let me tell you who really deserves the credit. My supporters. The young athletes who look up to me and, most importantly, the game itself. Elle's expression shifted. She thought she had her angle. But you know, some people say your success has been selective. That women's basketball only gets attention when the right kind of player is in the spotlight. Doesn't that raise questions about fairness? Caitlin's eyes narrowed slightly. Selective or earned? She asked. She let the question hang in the air before continuing. I understand why some in the media might struggle with that concept. It's easier to create narratives than to acknowledge reality. A nervous murmur rippled through the audience, and Elle shifted in her chair, clearly not expecting Caitlin to push back. But she didn't back down. Instead, Elle pressed harder. Well, what I mean is, there are many talented players who don't get the same level of recognition. Don't you think that raises questions about fairness? Caitlin's response was immediate. Fairness is a game of effort. The same way I don't expect a game to be handed to me, I don't expect success to be handed to anyone. Respect isn't given. It's earned through performance, leadership, and impact. And I refuse to apologize for putting in the work. The audience murmured in agreement. Elle's practiced smile faltered as she realized her tactics weren't working. But she didn't let up. But don't you think your media presence also plays a role? Being in the right place at the right time? Caitlin chuckled, but there was no humor in it. You know what's interesting about that question? It shows exactly what's wrong with how some people think. Success isn't about being in the right place. It's about what you do once you get there. And me? I don't just show up. I deliver. The audience erupted in applause. Elle's face flushed slightly as she realized her narrative was crumbling, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. Well, since we're talking about perception, Elle said, her tone bolder. Some say that women's sports wouldn't be where they are today without certain players fitting a marketable image. Don't you think that plays a role? The silence in the studio was deafening. Several audience members audibly gasped. Caitlin sat still for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but lethal. Marketable. Image? She repeated. Let me tell you something about value. Value isn't about what's on the outside. It's about what you bring to the table. Your skills, your discipline, your impact. And if you think the rise of women's sports is about a marketable image instead of years of hard work by countless athletes, then you haven't been paying attention. Elle's face went pale. Caitlin didn't let up. You sit here asking about image while demonstrating exactly why women's sports have had to fight for recognition. Instead of celebrating performance, leadership, and excellence, some people would rather focus on appearances. The audience exploded into applause, and Elle's smile had completely vanished. She tried to recover, but Caitlin wasn't done. You know what's really fascinating? Caitlin continued. You're asking about image while completely ignoring the real issue. That women's sports were undervalued, ignored, and dismissed for years. You're asking these questions because some people want to tear us down instead of lifting us. Up, Elle squirmed in her seat. Caitlin turned to face the camera, speaking directly to viewers at home. Women's sports aren't about being given a platform. It's about earning it. It's about putting in the same effort, the same dedication, the same passion. It's about proving time and time again that we deserve to be here, not because of how we look, but because of how we play. The room fell silent. Elle, clearly flustered, tried to shift the conversation. Caitlin, with all the pressure and expectations, do you ever feel like it's too much? Would you ever step away from all of this? Caitlin chuckled softly. Too much? No, it's exactly what I signed up for. I love this game. I love competing. I love inspiring others. Sure, the pressure is there, but that's what comes with being great, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But Elle, desperate to regain control, pushed one final time. Some people say that success in women's sports is still dependent on certain factors, like image. Do you think that's fair? The room went dead silent. A few gasps could be heard from the audience. Elle had crossed a line. Caitlin's smile disappeared, and she folded her arms, her voice dangerously calm. Image? She repeated. Let me stop you right there. Because what you just said, that's the problem. Elle tried to interject, but Caitlin didn't let her. You're sitting here implying that a woman's success is based on something as superficial as image. You ignore all the hard work, sacrifice, injuries, and commitment and reduce it to appearance. That's insulting, not just to me, but to every woman who's fought for respect in this game. The audience erupted in applause, and Elle's face went pale. Caitlin leaned in one last time. Let me make this very clear. I am here because I worked for it. I earned it. And if anyone has a problem with that, it says more about them than it does about me. Elle Duncan knew in that moment she was finished. The producers quickly cut to commercial, but it was too late. By the next morning, the interview had gone viral, with hashtags like, Caitlin Clark, destroys Elle Duncan trending everywhere. Sports outlets replayed the exchange, calling it the most iconic media takedown in years. Even networks critical of Caitlin couldn't ignore her incredible composure. Elle Duncan, however, faced a very different reality. Viewers demanded an explanation, and critics accused her of bias and pushing a toxic narrative. By the following week, Les Employer announced she would be stepping away to reflect and refocus, though everyone knew it was code for being forced out. Caitlin, true to form, hardly acknowledged the controversy. When asked about it in a post-game press conference, she simply smiled and said, I just focus on the game. The aftermath of the interview was undeniable. Journalism schools used the incident as a case study on how not to conduct an interview. The phrase, "Did you just Elle Duncan yourself?" became slang for ruining your credibility in one conversation. Caitlin Clark's status as a leader in women's sports only grew stronger, and the conversation about her shifted from questioning her success to celebrating her dominance both on and off the court. For Elle Duncan, there was no comeback. She gambled everything on a narrative that backfired spectacularly. In the end, it wasn't just the interview she lost, it was her career. And all it took was one conversation with Caitlin Clark to expose everything wrong with the way women's sports had been covered for years.